They said the West was wild, but no one warned him it would break his heart. He rode into town with nothing but dust on his boots and silence in his soul, searching for a place to disappear. But what he found instead was a nightmare wrapped in ropes and silence. A young girl, no older than 18, tied to a wooden post like an animal, her dress torn, her eyes empty, and her skin marked by bruises no one dared question. Laughter filled the streets. Cruel, careless laughter from the very men who were supposed to protect her, her own family. He didn't come looking for trouble. But trouble found him in the form of a broken girl who hadn't spoken a word in days. What kind of people do that to their own blood? And what kind of man walks away once he's seen it? In that moment, he made a choice not just to free her, but to stand between her and the hell she was born into. He didn't know her name, her story, or her sins. All he knew was that someone had to care, and no one else would. The sun hung high in the sky, beating down on the parched ground like a hammer on hot steel. Dust danced through the air, clinging to everything it touched. It coated the wooden buildings, the cracked windows, the faded wanted posters curling on the saloon wall. The wind carried the grit of the earth across the faces of those who didn't care to feel it anymore. People here had stopped feeling things a long time ago. This wasn't a town built on dreams. It was where dreams came to die. The wooden sign above the sheriff's office had long since lost its name, the paint chipped, and the justice gone with it. He rode in slow, the rhythmic clinging of hooves, almost the only sound, aside from the occasional hoot of laughter echoing from the saloon. He didn't carry a name people knew. He wasn't famous, nor did he want to be. His jacket was old and faded, the tan leather dulled by miles of sun. His boots were scarred. His eyes even more so. He had the look of a man who had seen too much and said too little. People turned to glance as he passed, but only briefly, then went back to pretending the day was normal. As if there wasn't a girl tied to a post just 20 yards away. He saw her before he saw the rest. At first, it didn't register what he was looking at. Just a figure, unmoving in the sun, slumped slightly, hands tied in front, hair matted and wild like it hadn't seen a brush in weeks. She was wearing what once might have been a dress, beige or cream maybe, but now it was the color of the ground, torn and clinging. Her face was downcast, lips cracked, one cheek bruised and swollen. The kind of silence she sat in didn't belong to the living. It was the kind of silence that came after screaming had long stopped being worth it. He stopped his horse and dismounted, slowly scanning the street. Nobody moved. Nobody cared. A few of the men outside the saloon turned to look, one of them chuckling with a cigar hanging out the side of his mouth. They didn't seem threatened. They'd seen his type before. Loners passed through like tumbleweeds, always angry, always haunted, but never sticking long enough to matter. He walked over to the watering trough and let his horse drink, but his eyes never left the girl. He could tell she hadn't been there long enough to die, but long enough to wish she would. Her wrists were scraped raw from the ropes. There was blood on her knuckles, dried and flaking. A chain around her ankle tied to the base of the post, rusted and heavy, like they wanted to make sure she didn't crawl away even if she tried. He looked around again, waiting to see some sign that the sheriff might step out, that someone might say something, but nothing, not a word. Just more laughter. A man with a greasy shirt and a smug grin came out of the shadows, then sidling up toward him like they'd known each other for years. He smelled of old whiskey and bad decisions. "She is?" the cowboy asked flatly. The man chuckled, spitting to the side. "She ain't nobody's," he replied. "Girl's a curse. Her own P says she was born wrong. Got the devil in her." He leaned in a little. Besides, she tried to run. Folks around here don't take kindly to girls running away, especially not from blood. The cowboy turned his gaze back to her. She still hadn't moved. Not a twitch, not a blink. Like she'd become part of the wood, blending into the post, waiting to rot away. "How long's she been out there?" he asked. The man shrugged. "Couple days P says she ain't earned water yet. Maybe tomorrow if she behaves." Another laugh. The cowboy didn't join him. He stepped forward, crunching the dry dirt beneath him. A gust of wind whipped up the dust, blinding for a second. When it cleared, he stood just a few feet from her. She didn't lift her head. Her eyes stayed fixed to the ground, lips pressed tight like they'd forgotten how to speak. He didn't touch her. Not yet, just looked. Something about the way she sat told him she expected a blow if she moved. Maybe she'd been trained not to react, not to breathe too loudly. "You got a name?" he asked softly. No answer. He glanced back at the saloon. A few of the men were watching now, smirking. One of them shouted, "She ain't worth the trouble, stranger. Let the animal die." The cowboy didn't flinch. He turned back and crouched slowly so he could meet her at eye level. "I ain't here to hurt you," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Just want to know who did this." Still nothing, but her fingers moved. A slight tremble, barely noticeable, unless you were looking for it. He was. He waited a moment longer, then stood and turned away. Maybe she couldn't speak yet. Maybe they'd taken more than just her freedom. He went into the general store and bought a flask of water and a small cloth. When he came back, the man in the vest was still there watching. "You touch her, that's going to cost you." The man grinned, rubbing his fingers together. "Ain't nothing free in this town." The cowboy reached into his pocket and pulled out a few silver coins, flipping them slowly in his hand. "How much for a girl who's already been broken?" he asked coldly. The man's grin faltered for a second. "5. The cowboy dropped 6 into his palm. "For your silence, too." The man snatched the coins like a hungry rat and scurried off. The cowboy turned back to her, kneeling again. Gently, he poured a little water onto the cloth and held it out. She didn't move. "I won't do anything unless you want me to," he whispered. "This is yours, not mine." Her head lifted barely, just an inch. Her eyes, red and tired, met his for the first time. And there it was, a flicker, the tiniest spark of life still hiding in the ash. She reached out slowly, fingers trembling, and touched the cloth. He let her take it. He waited while she wiped her mouth and sipped from the flask. The sound of laughter from behind grew louder. More eyes on them now. The town didn't like kindness. He didn't understand it. To them, the girl was already gone. Just another piece of trash waiting to be cleared, but not to him. Not anymore. He stood and looked down at the chain. Heavy, locked, designed to make a point. He drew a small knife from his boot and knelt again. She flinched, but he didn't move toward her. He used it to pry the pin from the shackle. It took a few minutes, and when it finally clicked open, she gasped, not from pain, but from disbelief. She looked up at him fully now. The blank expression was cracking. Behind it, something raw and wild began to stir. Maybe hope, maybe fear, maybe both. He reached out a hand, not to grab, not to pull, but simply to offer. "Come with me," he said, "if you want out of here." And for a moment no one breathed. Not the girl, not the crowd, not even the wind. She stared at him like she was seeing sunlight for the first time in years. And then slowly she nodded.